Most leaders think that success is what shapes them. But what happens when success stops mattering? When you're sitting in a moment that you can't fix, that you can't control, and that you can't win? What's left of the leader you thought you were in those moments? Welcome to the Second Voice podcast, where we uncover the conversations that leaders don't say out loud. I'm your host, Louisa Hogan, and today we're exploring what leadership looks like when success can't teach you anything, but grief can. My guest today is the wonderful J.U. Jacobson. He's a funeral director, an entrepreneur, and a leadership voice shaped by moments where pressure, grief, and responsibility collide. Jay has testified before the United States Senate on funeral ethics and draws on decades of experience in disaster response, business ownership, and mentoring leaders to explore what leadership looks like when it actually matters. He's the author of Lead by Legendary Example, a story-driven book on integrity, presence, service, and legacy in real-world leadership. And I am so excited to have you with me today, Jay. Thank you so much for joining me from across the world at 10 p.m. at night. I know it's early in the morning for me and it's 10 p.m. for you, so I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you.
This is just a great way to wrap up my weekend, so I'm glad to be joining you.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Well, I've given a bit of a bio about you, Jay, but I'd love for the listeners who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit more about your background. I want to know more. I've never interviewed somebody who has been a funeral director and has been an entrepreneur in the space. So tell me more about you. What led you to where you are today and your path?
Well, my journey starts much earlier than most people think. I started at age 9 with a paper route. And some of the most vital lessons that I ever learned from leadership were actually learned at 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning by just showing up, being consistent, being there every morning, making sure that newspaper was delivered before my clients had their first cup of coffee in the morning. And then later in the week when I would have to go back and collect the fee for the subscription. And that process of collecting for the subscription taught me so much about being present. A lot of people don't realize that back, 40 years ago when I was carrying newspaper, 50 years ago now, um, we had to go back and we had to collect for the subscription every week. And I think some of the people on my route had a newspaper subscription just so somebody would come and visit them once a week. And I would be that person. So on Thursday night, I'd be knocking on the door and they'd say, I've got a piece of pie. Come on in and have a piece of pie. Or I've set out a board game. You want to play a board game while you're here? And looking back, you realize how lonely some of these people were. That, just to have the newspaper carrier who's only 9, 10 years old stop in and just spend a few minutes with them. So they weren't so lonely that evening. It drove my dad crazy. It took me forever to make it through my collection route, but I was doing something important. I was giving my presence. And I learned very early on that the gift that you can give of being fully present in the moment is something these folks will never forget. But I went on from there. I had a host of other job opportunities, everything from walking beans for farmers to making hay to detasseling corn. I spent some time in my high school years working for our local phone company where I learned a lot about technology and how all of that works together. And ultimately, I started working in funeral service. My foray into funeral home work was quite different than most of my colleagues. Most of the people I went to school with, they started into funeral service because their parents and their grandparents or even their great grandparents had owned funeral homes and they were just going into the family business. Well, I was the first one in my family ever to even go to college. I've got 5 brothers and I was the first one to graduate. I've had one other brother that graduated from college, but that was it. But when I was a junior in high school, I was asked to be a pallbearer at my aunt's funeral up in South Dakota. And to put it mildly, it was not a good experience. It was terribly done. It was not well organized. It wasn't professional. So I came back from that experience saying somebody has to be able to do this better. And it became my life's work. I literally started the day after I graduated from high school. I moved into the basement of a funeral home in the town that I was going to be going to college in that fall and started my career. And I've been doing it pretty much ever since.
Talk about a calling. That's so amazing because you heard that calling and you answered that calling, right? It's you know,
Well, and for people, if you pay attention, you listen to what's out there and what's really speaking to you, you find your calling. It isn't something that you have to go searching for. It finds you.
yeah.
You just have to be willing to listen.
Yeah, I so agree with that. And that's about, this podcast all about that inner voice and listening to the inner voice and which inner voice you listen to. And so sometimes that calling comes to you and people need to learn like what's the real calling? Can I hear that voice? Can I listen to it? Can I heed it? And amazing that you did that. And so you were in college still and then you started that work and then what did you set up your own business or were you
Well,
working with somebody?
I spent most of my career in funeral service working for other people, whether that be small family owned funeral homes, which is where I started. The funeral home I started at was owned by a second generation family, and it ultimately became a third generation family. And I learned a valuable lesson in that is that family is thicker than employees. And as soon as his son said, I want to come back and go into the funeral business, I was out. A big eye opener for how the world really works. But things like that made a huge difference because I learned something and I always found myself in a better position. So I went from working there to working the summer after my first year of college for another family owned funeral home that was only 15 minutes from my hometown. Had two wonderful mentors there. One of them was 85 years old when I met him. I think he had funeral director license number 2 in our state. So he'd been doing it a very long time. And he was meticulous and he was consistent in who he was, whether he was working or he's in the community or he's in his church. He was always the same person. And it was refreshing to see somebody who could function at that level and could always be the person you expected. And on the flip side, the owner of the funeral home was only 27 years old, and he was very good when he was working. But as soon as the time he was off the clock, his life fell apart. Um, Ultimately, he ended up losing his family. He ended up losing his business. But just watching these two examples, the dichotomy of success in life versus success in business, and what that teaches you, that you have to have that success in life in order to have long-term success in business, is a lesson that stayed with me throughout my career. But I've worked for large corporations. I've worked for small cooperatives. And I've done a lot of work lately working for a lot of independent funeral homes in a consulting nature, going in and helping them build their staff, to train the people, the next generation coming up.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that role, you're seeing a lot more of that, working with leadership in that role and mentoring leaders in that space.
Yes, there's a huge gap in the funeral profession here in the United States, and a lot of it has to do with COVID. When COVID hit, everybody was isolated. Uh, the workload, the stress load for funeral directors and funeral service was immense because when everybody else was dying from COVID, we were the ones going out and we were going out and getting exposed to it on a daily basis. And then
Mm.
having to go back home to our families and worry about, are we going to contract something that's going to spread to them? So it was very real stress that we felt at the time. So a lot of the people in my age, the late in their career, just decide I'm done. I'm going to give up, and so we don't have those mentors in place anymore. And so you have the owners who are still hanging on, owning their funeral homes, and you have new people coming into the career. but nobody in between to help train them, help mentor them long term. And so that's a role that I've been stepping into more and more. Everything from training people how to answer the phone to how to conduct an arrangement conference with families, how to anticipate things that could go wrong in a funeral service. Just be there and be present with what's happening.
Yeah.
Um, and the communication skills that we're having to teach, particularly younger people, are so much different than what that I had to experience. Um, for a lot of us, or for most of us, when we're growing up, we learn to read body language. We learn to read what's going on in a room by observing. And that happens usually between age 13 and age 18. Well, that's exactly the time that we're handing young people a cell phone, a computer
Mm-hmm.
screen, a tablet. And so instead of having their eyes up looking around a room, they're looking into the palm of their hand. And so they never quite learn those people skills. They don't understand what the body language and the tone mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm spending a lot of my time helping them learn that
Yeah.
and really practice to know how to read that room.
Yeah, I never thought of that. And what an important skill to have in the work that you do, right? Because you're dealing with people in their most vulnerable time of their
Yes,
life, grieving.
we have crucial conversations with families several times a day. I mean, every time that someone comes in, every time they call us, there's a huge amount of crucial information that we have to process through,
Mm-hmm.
that we have to help them through and help solve a problem that they have. And so when we don't have those communication skills, and communication skills are a huge part of leadership. You can't communicate, you can't lead. But if you don't have those, then you're setting at a disadvantage and you aren't able to best serve the people around you or even your coworkers. So we start with that. We start with those communication skills.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, Jane, like what are some of the leadership lessons that you've learned on this journey as a funeral director and even working now directly with, various people working in the space?
Well,
What lessons have you learned in leadership that people wouldn't have thought of in terms of, you're experiencing people going through this grief, how you have to be there for them, and what are the general lessons that you can apply to leadership in general, even if you don't work in the space, that some people would never have thought of?
well, probably the biggest and most foundational is integrity.
Hmm.
Um, Everything grows from integrity. If people cannot trust you to be the person you say you're going to be, they can't trust you to do the things that you're promising to do, then nothing else matters. So you've got to start with that foundation of integrity and those skills, whether it be integrity or it be servant leadership or it be adaptability or vision, whatever it is, they have to be practiced in small ways and they have to be practiced every single day. Now, you spend a lot of time talking in your podcast about what success teaches us about leadership. I would argue that success doesn't teach us a lot about leadership. It's everything we do to lead up to the things that challenge us to have success that teach us about leadership. It's those little tiny decisions we make when they're small issues. They're little things that don't really matter a lot, but in the big picture they do. And so when you practice integrity and when you practice focusing on vision every single day, when the big things come up, things like sitting before a Senate committee and having to testify, when responding to a plane crash, you've already developed those skills. They show up because you practice them. They
Hmm.
don't show up because you need them. They show up because you've rehearsed them and they're part of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when your authenticity is so important too, right? So if you practice it. What is this is a podcast about self-talk. Tell me what is the self-talk that goes on in somebody who does your line of work? What are you saying to yourself while you're doing your line of work to keep you? Because I imagine it would be challenging dealing with the grief all the time, right? So,
It is.
what's the self talk that you experience?
You begin by realizing that people are counting on you, not just the family that's sitting in front of you, but the whole community and the whole staff around you. But one of the things I always tell myself, and I often remind my staff and those that I'm training, we do this every single day. Our families, our clients only get to do it once. They only have one chance at remembering their loved one. And so we have to remember that it is special and it's unique, and we owe them our very best every single time, whether that be cleaning a car, mowing the grass, cleaning a toilet, uh, a video presentation we put together, or something as simple as writing an obituary for a family. We have to give it our very best every single time because they're counting on us. And it can seem a little bit rote to us, but it certainly isn't to our families for certain.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine that could be really challenging, for somebody maybe even new in the work and still learning about the work that you're doing. And you're right, it feels like rote. It's just, it becomes routine. Every job you do, you've got routine parts of your role. So I could imagine how challenging it would be to keep reminding yourself about that so you don't go into work today and just treat it like another day, right?
And
Yeah.
and there are skills that we can use to keep us from becoming routine.
Yeah.
Um, when I sit down with a family, a lot of my colleagues will sit down with a checklist and a form to fill out. I sit down with a blank sheet of paper and I start by saying, "Tell me about your loved one," and I let them go. I let them
Yeah.
tell me whatever they want. And then we let the conversation go wherever it drives on its own until I've got a good picture of the person that we're caring for and the family that's caring for them as well. And
Mhm.
so when you have those two pieces, the person that you're burying or cremating, and you have the family you're serving, you can find ways to make it non routine
Mhm.
by being present in that moment and really focusing in on the conversation that's happening, the body language in particular that you're seeing. You can get a really good picture of who these people are and how you can serve them.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of families are broken. Uh, they come together and have to make decisions in a room with a person like me, and they just as soon be in any other room without their relatives there because they don't get along. But for that short period of time, they have to sit in a room and make decisions together. And if you miss those cues, if you miss that somebody in the room is uncomfortable, you can spend that whole arrangement conference and talk to everybody else and miss somebody who's very important that has something that needs to contribute
Mhm.
to the conversation. They just need to have permission. And so it's not
Yeah.
unusual for me to sit there and see the person that's sitting there with their arms folded and a scowl on their face. And I'll say, "Now, John, it looks like you have something to add to the conversation." And just
Yeah.
kind of pull them in. And the whole room just kind of melts because all of a sudden you've touched the elephant in the room and you're inviting them into the conversation. And that's where healing can start happening for some of these families.
Yeah.
When somebody starts talking and others start listening because I'm listening.
Yeah. I'm getting goosebumps because I think there's such a lesson in. I work with organizations. I go in and consult to big businesses and so forth. And I think anyone listening here today, if you're thinking, oh, well, I don't work in this space, I'm never going to be a funeral director, there's nothing for me to learn. I just think what you just said is something so important because if you are a in a team or where you're working with customers, you've said it, it's like servant leadership. You're serving those people and you're doing that whether you're handing out hamburgers, you're doing customer service on a insurance line, whether you're dealing directly with people that are you're helping with clients, whatever it is, what you just said is exactly what we need to take into all of our roles, not just in something like this.
Well,
And somebody listening might be going, oh, Well, you have to do that because you're working with people in their most vulnerable and grieving state. You have to do that no matter what role you're in, right?
You think about a boardroom, and you're
Yeah.
sitting around a boardroom table, and you're on the board, or you're conducting the meeting. The same situation applies. You have people in that room that, by their very function, are designed to disagree. Board
Mm.
only works if people disagree. If
Yeah.
they all agree, you don't need the board. But when you can take that disagreement and you can channel it in positive ways, and you can keep it from digressing down to the personal level and stay with the issues and help model what it means to treat people with respect, to listen to them, to hear their point of view, and then be able to ask the question, have you considered also? And bring other ideas into that same idea, and mold it and shape it until you have something that is better than all of the ideas that came to the table individually. You have something that works for the whole group. That's what we're talking about. That's the same principle in a funeral arrangement. When we bring all of those ideas in, we shape them, we mold them, and we create something that honors the person that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Or in the boardroom, we honor the issue we're talking about.
Yeah.
So these are all
So
life
true.
skills that transcend in individual occupations.
Yeah. 100%. I see that in teams. Often I work with teams with change management, dealing with change. But the first thing that we have to deal with is how that team trusts each other, how they have open discussions so that they can agree on things. And we don't often, we don't need a general consensus or everyone to agree. We need people to say what they disagree with. And then at the end, even if I still disagree, we agree that this is the way forward, even if I disagree with what it is. And it can be really tricky for people to see that. And I think in an environment where you are primed to listen, you it could potentially, you're reminded through the work that you do to do that, but other people in other roles forget that that's the whole purpose of what we do, to listen to each other, to get perspective, to disagree. Yeah.
One of my board presidents, he hit it on the nail. He said, we have to disagree. We
Mm.
have to respectfully have dialogue in the meeting. We have to hold the meeting in the meeting, not outside of the meeting. We have to make a decision, and then when we go out from the meeting, we have to support the decision that we made as a group.
Yeah,
And it's
100%.
pretty simple, but so many boards and so many organizations get that wrong.
They
And so
find it hard.
it is hard, because
Mm.
if you don't feel heard in the meeting, those things happen. And so you create space so people feel heard in the meeting.
Mhm.
Then you eliminate a lot of that. Well, I'm going to go talk to somebody after the meeting because I didn't get my chance. You give them their chance.
Yeah, for sure. I'm interested a little bit more in grief, and as from what I understand, reading up about you and going through your work, and before our interview today, Jay, you've gone through some of your own grief, and you experience grief with the people you work with every single day. Has grief changed the way that you see your own leadership or your responsibility as a leader?
It absolutely has. It late in my career, I lost my mom,
Hmm.
and it really changed the way that I looked at how I approach making arrangements with families, uh, how I listen. I was sitting on the other side of the table, and so I had a funeral director who was asking me questions, who was going through all the things that I normally went through with families, and it felt hollow. It felt like he wasn't listening. There were many times my mom worked for the Postal Service, and in the United States, when you're a postal worker, you're not on our Social Security system, which is our federal retirement and benefit organization. But he repeatedly asked questions that were only specific to Social Security, and it just bothered me. He wasn't listening. He hadn't heard what was really going on. He had a form he was filling out, and it really refocused me on, okay, let's get to know the person we're taking care of first. Let's make sure that we do everything right. And And I think one of the hardest parts for me happened in the interment out at the Veterans Cemetery. My mom was cremated. Being the funeral director, I'm always the last person in the line. So when they set up the procession with the cars, I made sure everybody got in procession. I followed in behind. When I got to the cemetery, I was the last one coming up because my car was parked the furthest away. And the funeral director started the committal before I was there. And that always set difficult with me because that's one of the things I've always strived to do. Always look around, make sure
Mm.
everybody's up, everybody's close, everybody that should be there is there before you ever say one word of the committal service. And
Mm.
so those little things mean a whole lot. We're actually going through something right now. My one of my favorite aunts passed away earlier this week, and her daughter is about 12 years younger than I am. So growing up, I never got to know her very well. Well, when they had to put my aunt in a hospice home, it was close to my residence. So I invited her daughter to come and stay with us while she was in the hospice house. Got to know her, got to really get to understand part of my family I didn't have an opportunity with. But just being present for her and being able to listen to the stories and watch as she went through this and what it meant to her to have somebody who was actually listening uh, was a good example of why it's important to be present.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it changes things when you have to experience the thing that you're usually working in, right? When you're the one on the receiving
Exactly.
end, and yeah, that's so
You notice
hard.
a lot more.
Yeah. And I'm sure it made you think even more about what was important in the work that you do. And again, like I can hear it in your voice and I can hear the passion in your voice about service and presence. Those are things that I feel very strongly about too. Servant leadership, serving, everything that you do has to be in service to the people that you're working with. Because when you do that, it returns twofold, it really does, just in meaning and, you know, so yeah, I appreciate that.
And one of the side benefits of doing that kind of servant leadership is there are young people watching, whether it be
Mm,
coworkers or in my case, my grandchildren are always watching and they're learning from you and learning from the example that you lay out before them. And, I've been around enough, I'm 65 now, and watching as some of those traits start to show up in your grandchildren and in your coworkers. And you just get that little smile in the back of your head that says, I recognize that.
yeah,
And you know that you're making the next generation better.
yeah, for sure. It's a little pat on the back moment for yourself, really. I want to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, and that's the term. I'm the strong one because I believe that we need to be steady leaders, not strong leaders, because
Right,
strength is
exactly.
often performative. We're pretending that we're strong on the outside, but inside we're internally broken, but we're showing everybody this face. Um, what does strength actually look like when you're navigating grief, or even if it's not grief, maybe prolonged uncertainty? What have you found? You've seen lots of people who are going through a grieving process who are portraying their strength or who actually are strong. What in your mind is somebody who is strong?
My wife.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. The book that I wrote was never meant to be written. I never set out to be an author. But about 2 years ago, my wife went in for a routine knee surgery. It went horribly wrong. And since that time, over 18 months, she had to have 12 major surgeries. And in that time, we went through horrible things for her. The pain of having to have a knee replaced multiple times, the pain of infection, uh, the pain of the delirium that comes as being in the hospital and having that much anesthesia, all of those things, and just getting built back up, and just being about able to walk with a walker and having to start over again, and to watch her every single day for the past 2 years have some type of therapy, whether it be physical or cognitive or emotional therapy, and to watch to see what she has been able to accomplish and still maintain a positive attitude.
Yeah.
And that's strength, but it's more than strength. It's that resilience of knowing that I can do this, uh, to have the ability to go through all this and still be able to be a presence for the people around her. She's always there for the grandsons. She's always there for our daughters. Uh, and as much as she can, she's there for me. And so that is the picture that I see when you talk about that kind of strength.
Yeah.
Now, I get to have strength when I'm dealing with families, but I'm a little more detached because I'm
Yeah.
there to help them. Yes, I'm there to connect with them, but she's living the issues that we're dealing with, and that's the measure of true strength.
Oh, amazing. She sounds like an amazing, I mean, to go through therapy, some type of therapy every single day for 2 years. You're right. That's not for the faint of heart. So
It is not.
um, I wish her a lot of healing. I do hope she heals up and that she comes good for you. I do hope
She
that
is
for her.
doing really well. She is walking with a walker.
Yeah.
We were out this weekend and she did a lot of walking. She did shopping in an outdoor mall for the first time in years. And it was just really nice to be able to watch her do that.
Yeah. Well, a couple of last questions for somebody who's listening who hasn't faced loss yet or faced that amount of grief yet, but inevitably will. We're all going to face grief someday, particularly when it comes to losing a loved one. What advice would you give to people out there to for how they can start building inner alignment so that when that grief inevitably comes, that they can be strong in that non-performative way and be those servant leaders in those moments? What can people do to align themselves to that now?
I think one of the biggest things that I see on the funeral side of it is don't be afraid to say the things you need to say. Um, a lot of families go and say, I'll get around to that, and they never do. So tell the people that you love them. Tell the people I'm sorry. Tell the people I forgive you. Those are probably the most important phrases that you can use leading up to uh, losing somebody. Because when the person's gone, you can't go back. You can't go back and say, I wish I had done. Do it. Yeah, do it. Go on the trip. Do the things you wish you could do, and don't wait. Now, um, spending my whole career in and around people who had lost people before they were ready, um, it helped us approach our life differently. We didn't wait till we retired to travel. We didn't wait to take our kids to special events and special things. We did it throughout our lives. And I always told them, I said, I don't want to be in the nursing home thinking I should have. I'd rather be in the nursing home remembering what I did.
Yeah.
And so when you start looking at your life with a sense of urgency, that it's very temporal. No one's life goes on forever. And so you crowd as much as you can and living and quality living into that tiny amount of space that we have. And then you can face the end with no regrets. The people around you can face it with no.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant advice. And I think advice just in general for leadership, be present. Again, it comes back to that presence that you so wonderfully talk about. It's like be present in your every moment. Don't be delay. Somebody told me the other day, one of my podcast guests, she didn't say it on the podcast, but she said it to me while we were chatting, and she said should and shame are the same word because you hold shame with the word should, and
Absolutely.
in leadership it's the same. Be present, don't hold back on what you need to say, but do it kindly, do it with kindness and awareness, and everything works out so much better, doesn't it, when you
It
do
certainly
that?
does. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
remember the person across from you, whether that be your family, a coworker, a stranger. They're all going through their own stuff.
Yeah.
They all have their own hurts. They all have their own challenges. And if you can lift one little burden from them, make one little thing better for them today, imagine how much better they'll feel tomorrow. Uh,
Amazing.
so, yeah, as people, we need to remember to do that. I mean, face everybody who we come in contact with as if you know they're important, they're special, and they're going through their own private grief, their own private troubles, and do what we can to help.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you're the author of an amazing book. I've read through all of. I'm in the process of ordering your book. Before I came onto this interview, I've saved it. I want to read your book because reading all the reviews, how people have just been talking about how it's just such a story of it's such a revelation to them. Tell us more about your book and where can people find you? Where can they connect with you if they want to connect with you more or talk to you more?
This leadership book isn't written like any other leadership book. It is written from stories like we've shared here, stories of being a paper boy, stories of sitting in front of a Senate committee and having to give testimony when you're in your late 20s, stories of helping people through plane aircraft disasters, all of those things that help build the leadership characteristics we talk about. And so all of those stories are firsthand. All of those discoveries we made in terms of what's important in leadership come from those stories, and they are derived directly from them. So it points you directly to how that was built. In the second half of the last part of the book, it's actually a 10-week workshop in how to build those leadership skills in teams. So my publisher wanted me to do two separate books. I said, no, I want them all in one. And I'm glad I did, because you finish reading the book and then you have right in front of you the next step. How do I take this from the book that I just read to integrate it into my team that I'm trying to build? And you don't have to wonder. It's right there. But that book, Lead by Legendary Example, it's available on Amazon. It's available in both print and audio. It's available on Apple's audiobooks. We had a wonderful gentleman, Fred Lang, who did the narration for us. I couldn't do it myself because I couldn't get through reading it. It's too emotional. And in fact, he would email me and he would say, I understand why you didn't narrate this, because for me, who didn't live those stories, I'm having to do them 3 and 4 cuts. So I'm not breaking up reading it. And so it's very emotionally written. It's not a long book, so it's an easy read or an easy listen. And so I encourage you to check it out. As far as getting in touch with me, you can reach me at my website, jacobsonprostaff.com, or I'm also on LinkedIn. And one of the other things that we haven't talked about here today is I also run a cookie company. One of my entrepreneurial things that I've delved into. It's a hobby that went crazy, and now we'll ship as many as 650 dozen cookies a week all over the country.
Amazing.
That's jayscookies.net. But that's another place you can
Do you
find
ship
me.
to Australia? I don't know. We probably couldn't get them into Australia.
We have, but it takes so long to get them there that by the
Yeah.
time they get there, they're not soft and chewy like they need to be. So
Well, you know what? When I'm in the States next, I'll be definitely looking up your I'll definitely looking up your cookies. I feel like there's so much more we could have talked about. I can't wait to read your book because I'd love to delve more into those stories, and I encourage everyone listening to do the same and to look up your cookies. Talking about your cookie business, have you applied all of the lessons that you've learnt through your funeral director work into your cookie business, or have you found that it's completely separate for you?
those life skills, those people skills translate. And there's something almost primal about giving somebody cookies. It
Yeah.
forms a relationship. And our cookie business actually started working from my consulting business. We were helping businesses say thank you to their customers. They didn't know how to do it. I said, I'll bake them some cookies. We'll send it out and see if it works. Well, we put a website up in November, and by Christmas we were doing 250 dozen cookies a week.
Wow.
But we work with businesses mostly. We also work with consumers directly. But businesses will send me a list. I want these 50 people sent thank you gifts. We do the baking, the packaging. We even do the thank you notes to go with them and make sure they get delivered or shipped. And it makes it easy so the business people can focus on what they do to make money.
Yeah.
And we can focus on thanking their customers.
Amazing.
We hear over and over from our business clients that we've tried a lot of different things to say thank you, but this is the only thank you gift that we have ever sent out that our customers send us a thank you for the thank you.
Amazing.
And so
Well,
that connection is,
congratulations on that.
yeah, it's a lot of fun to send a smile. After years and years of working
Yep.
in funerals, we send smiles on the other business.
Yeah, that's what a balance. I've always wondered, it sounds like, like people who do, florists, people who do flower bouquets and send them out. I think what a wonderful, happy job because you deliver smiles. And every time you hand somebody flowers, unless it is for somebody who's grieving, but even then, in a grieving moment, you're giving them something that uplifts them. And what a wonderful way to live your days is to do that for people.
Yeah. And who doesn't love a nice, soft chocolate chip cookie?
Ah, my husband's going to be straight on to looking up your cookies because we love cookies. My daughter would love your cookies, so definitely look that up next time we're in the States. But yeah, thank you so
We
much,
do.
Jay. Oh, carry on.
Oh, we do some interesting flavors. We've got things like triple chocolate Guinness espresso. We've got an Irish coffee one that has Bailey's Irish cream and Jameson whiskey in it. We do a champagne cookie. So we have some unique things, and they usually come to me about 2 o'clock in the morning. I wake up thinking, hey, this would be good.
That's when the best ideas come. I think you need to come to Australia and make those here for us. I
I
think
should do
because
that,
Irish
yeah.
Irish coffee flavor. Oh my goodness! Can you even make a better flavor? That's amazing.
It's
Oh, well,
wonderful.
that's wonderful. Well, Jay, thank you so much. We've run out of time today, but I have so appreciated talking to you. I really resonated a lot with what you've had to say, and I'm sure the listeners will too. Thank you for sharing so authentically with us. And I can't wait to read more about your story and your experiences with the US Senate and, responding to airplane crashes and, learning those lessons too. So I know that I'm going to get a lot from that. So I appreciate that. For everyone listening today, what I've taken out of today talking to Jay is that grief doesn't just change how we feel, it reveals who we are. And we're in leadership, that truth is what people will follow long after success. And that is what we need to be aiming for in leadership is finding that authenticity, finding that service, finding that presence, so that we as leaders can align ourselves with what is good for the world in general. So thanks again, Jay, and thank you to everyone listening. We'll see you next time.
And thank you.